Lately, I've been playing this single-player narrative-driven game that I really love on my PlayStation. And don't worry, I didn't do anything dirty or unsavory or any scalping to get this PlayStation 5. It's just a good old-fashioned PlayStation 4. But in my opinion, no matter what console it is, video games are one of, if not the best storytelling mediums that exist in our world today. It's easy for me to get deeply involved in what I'm playing, and my wife Molly, she likes to make fun of the faces that I make, because if it's a really intense part of the story or a really tough fight sequence, I'll squint my eyes and I'll even stick my tongue out and I move my mouth around, and I don't even know that I'm doing it until she just starts laughing at me mercilessly. I'm just completely engrossed in what's happening on the TV. But Molly, she mostly enjoys reading stories, and she reads fictional, narrative-driven books that she gets into just as deeply. And she makes some faces of her own. Don't let her tell you otherwise. But oftentimes, we do these separate things while we sit together in the same room because we just like to be around each other no matter what we're doing. Aw, marriage. And because of this close proximity, we've developed a habit where if something exciting happens in one of our stories, we have to tell each other about it. What's funny about this occurrence and this exchange is that neither one of us really has any clue about any of the background information that's going on in the story itself or about the characters that are involved. And to be honest, most of the time, neither of us really care at all. But we want to honor each other's time and interests by giving each other our complete attention when something exciting happens. So it happens like this, for example. Molly, she'll just be reading next to me, and she'll make some face like, and she'll look at me, and I'll see it out of the corner of my eye. She looks back at the book, she looks at me again, and then she finishes whatever passage that she was reading. And then she grabs the stack of papers that she calls a bookmark, and she shuts her book on it, because she never has just one. It's not an actual bookmark. It's like a pile of an envelope, an invitation to a wedding that we went to 3 years ago, maybe a sticky note with a random recipe on it, and then lately it's been this like string of pictures that you get from one of those arcade places in a photo booth. But anyway, she takes this whole stack, she grabs them all, she stuffs it in the book, and she closes it. And that's my cue to pause my game and listen. She proceeds to tell me all the things that just happened that led to this huge twist in the book. So I'm just like, whoa! And I just act like my mind is blown and that my whole world is shaking. But she knows that I really don't care. But she is excited, and that makes me excited. So then we both just laugh, and we return to what we were doing before because I do the exact same thing and get the exact same reaction from her if something happens in my game, my story. See, interesting stories, whether they're funny or tragic or romantic or scary or fantastical, are a huge part of society today. Binge watching the latest show with the most intricate story and most memorable characters has become a must. The most popular movies make over $1 billion in theaters worldwide nowadays, and video game creators write extensive backstories and detailed lore to enrich the worlds that they create. And of course, well-written books have captured the attention of audiences for centuries now. And even before things were being written down, people made a living memorizing huge stories, mostly in the form of songs, and those tales sometimes even helped shape the foundations of ancient cultures. No matter where it comes from, stories are powerful. The most powerful story in all of human history is held in the pages of the best-selling book in all of human history. And it'd be better if it was a video game, if you ask me, but I'm just kidding. If I have to read, I guess I'll do it. But we call this story the Gospel, and it's told in the first 4 books of the New Testament, which is the second section of your Bible. And this is where we can read of Jesus' miraculous birth, his ministry as an adult, and his eventual sin-destroying sacrificial death that resulted in his resurrection and our salvation. That was the point of Jesus' story. And in order for us to live the most fulfilling lives possible, that story is essential. That death and resurrection connects us directly to God in a way that had never been done before, and he is moving all the time in our lives. Because of that, we have plenty of our own powerful stories to tell. And today, we're going to talk about how you should make a habit of sharing your faith stories with others. Let's pick up in the epilogue of the story that we just talked about in the Gospel of Mark after Jesus' resurrection. When Jesus rose early on the first day of the week, he appeared first to Mary Magdalene, out of whom he had driven 7 demons. She went and told those who had been with him and who were mourning and weeping. And when they heard that Jesus was alive and that she had seen him, they did not believe it. Afterwards, Jesus appeared in a different form to 2 of them while they were walking in the country. These returned and reported it to the rest, but they did not believe them either. So later, Jesus appeared to the 11. He's talking about, the book here is talking about the disciples as they were eating. He rebuked them for their lack of faith and their stubborn refusal to believe those who had seen him after he had risen. He said to them, "Go into all the world and preach the gospel to all creation. Whoever believes and is baptized will be saved, but whoever does not believe will be condemned." So here, we find Jesus risen from the dead and visiting the people who were closest to him while he was alive. And right before he goes up to heaven for good, he visits the disciples. That was the 11. And if you know anything about the Bible or Jesus' story, you may be thinking, the 11? I thought there were 12. But we're talking about the disciples minus Judas, because he's been, voted off the island for being a dirty traitor. Big oof on his part, because Judas is no longer actually even alive at this point. But those are details for another day. But what I love about all of this is that Jesus is resurrected from the dead, and as a zombie, an angel, Danny Phantom, whatever you want to call it, he goes and he visits Mary first. She goes and tells everyone that wants to know that Jesus is back, but they don't believe her. So Jesus tells 2 more people, and no one believes them either. So finally, Jesus shows up to everybody at once, and is like, "Look, y'all, me, it's the real deal." And in one of the other Gospels, the book of John, we read about this guy named Thomas who was there at this dinner. And he didn't believe that Jesus was really back from the dead, even though he was right there. So get this. He asked to put his finger in Jesus' nail holes where he was nailed to the cross and where he was stabbed in the side and had an open wound by a spear. And despite how freaking weird that is, Jesus is like, "Okay, if you have to, ever catering to us, the unbelievers." So I just see them standing there, Jesus and Thomas. The disciples are all around, probably about to eat, and they're just watching this happen. And it's just like, can you imagine that? But anyway, once everybody is on the same page, and Thomas has hopefully washed his hands, the disciples receive what many call the Great Commission from Jesus. He tells them to go into all the world and preach the gospel to all creation. He wants them to go tell his story to everyone. And here's the best part. He wasn't just talking to the disciples. He was talking to us too. We're supposed to still be doing that, the telling, today. We're part of this story as it continues to unfold. And we just talked about a few minutes ago about what Jesus' story was. And so we now know that it's still just as important for us today. And we know that he has commanded us to tell everyone about it. So how do we do that? What are some ways that you've seen people tell someone about Jesus successfully? Or not? I think back to some mission trips that I've been on in the deep South, where we're joined by churches from states like Alabama and Florida and other places that are deep in the Bible Belt. And if you were on a crew that was led by one of the adults from one of these churches, you may have been asked to walk around and do some good old-fashioned, door-to-door evangelicalizing. And I'm seriously not trying to bash anybody here, because people like that, they really mean well. And they're passionate about Jesus and his story and the people that need to hear it. But those kinds of things they've developed kind of a bad reputation. I mean, nowadays shows and movies make fun of people knocking on people's doors and getting ignored. Or how many times have you heard someone jokingly say, "Can I tell you about our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ?" Now, don't get me wrong, it's not always a bad idea to do something like that. Sometimes it's appropriate, but oftentimes, people who are in a place in their lives where they really don't want to hear about Jesus, they develop a habit of their own where they will shut down or maybe even grow hostile when approached like this. But how about this example I think is never good? The person on social media who jumps onto a post with a comment that's just dripping in hate, condemning people for a lifestyle that they don't agree with, and often incorrectly citing Jesus or the Bible as the source of their anger. I guess that's sharing something, but I'm not really sure that it's the truth of who Jesus is. So how can we do this the best? In order to effectively share what Jesus can do in our lives, we can share our own stories. I've found many times that the most impactful tool that I have at my disposal as a Christ follower when it comes to talking about Jesus is to share what Jesus has done or is doing in my life. So we've been talking in this series, Atomic, about building good habits in our faith journeys. Sharing stories about what God is doing in your life is something that you should turn into a habit because it reminds you of who God is, and it often shows others how He can change their own lives. I seriously cannot tell you how many deep, meaningful interactions that I've had with people that centered around a discussion about how God has shaped me into the person, the leader that I am today through my marriage and my pursuit of honoring Him by honoring my wife. The change is that I see the support that Molly gives to my calling to ministry and how that has allowed me to push to be so much better at it and to be fulfilled. God did that through this woman that He placed in my life and through the necessary changes that I had to make and continue to make to be the best I can be to, again, honor that blessing. I have relationships with close friends that work much the same way. These are people that God has helped surround me with who will always point me back to Him when I need it. So listen to this, guys. When people can see and hear about the monumental restructuring of who you are because of the movement of a God who loves them just as deeply and can do the same for them, they want to know more. And there are a couple steps that you can take to make a conversation like this the most effective that it can be. First, all the time, to the best of your ability, you should live like you are following Jesus. Walk the walk. Practice what you preach. Don't be a hypocrite. I'm not sure how else you've heard that said, but it is definitely true that the fastest way to get people to not listen to what you have to say is to talk one way and act another. If you're going to talk about all of the incredible ways that knowing Jesus has changed your life, you have to live like you've been changed. And this is just the first step because it requires a lot of groundwork and a lot of time. The hardest thing to build and the easiest thing to destroy is a good reputation. And there will never come a day when any of us do this perfectly, but we have to humbly continue to be introspective and self-critical in a healthy way so that we can continue to grow into better representations of Jesus' love. That way, when you have something to say about what Jesus has done in your life, people will recognize it and they'll believe it. So once you're working on that, then you can create opportunities. You can build relationships with the people around you everywhere you go. Elijah talked about the importance of this last week, and there are multiple levels to this. But even just on the surface, I want to give you a few examples. I don't wear headphones when I go into Walmart or the grocery store because I don't want to miss an opportunity to be asked a question or to say hello to someone because I don't look approachable. And if I'm about to walk by somebody in the gym, I will pause my music and put on a smile and give a nod. And if there's a good opportunity, I'll even introduce myself to them. On Sunday mornings at church and on Sunday nights at students, you guys can do this. I look for people in the atrium to talk to who look uncomfortable or nervous because I want them to know that because Jesus says that they are worth it, I believe it too. People wanted to talk to Jesus because He was open to talking to them. When it came to having conversations with people, Jesus didn't care if they were sick. He didn't care if they were outcasts. He didn't care if they were poor. That was never going to stop Him. In fact, He sought those people out. Jesus gained people's trust by being authentic and legitimately caring about them. And when they noticed that He was built differently and began to wonder why, He would tell them about and show them the true, powerful, life-changing nature of God. And they were inclined to listen. Because when you truly see Jesus working in your life, it will change your perspective. You start to look at things differently. And I talked about this earlier with my marriage and my friendships, but it can also look something like no longer seeing a large financial gift from someone that comes at just the right time as simply a coincidence. You see it as God's provision. You no longer see people lashing out at you when they're in pain as an affront that you should retaliate against. You see it as an opportunity to offer forgiveness and grace in a world that is largely devoid of it. You no longer see a happy, peaceful season of life as just finally getting a break from all of the turmoil and stress around you. You see it as favor from God and a chance to recalibrate and focus on Him and the blessings that you do have without having to worry about things crashing down around you. You no longer see a season in a dark valley as a bottomless pit that's impossible to get out of. Instead, it's a chance to experience clinging to God as He pulls you from it, and you can testify about the beauty of His faithfulness when you're finally standing back on the mountaintop again. So if you've been with us the past 2 weeks and you've taken it seriously and worked to create habits in your life about getting to know God and investing in your relationships, then you have stories to tell. And there are people who want to listen, because here's the thing, guys. You may not be able to recite a single verse of the Bible. You may be terrified of praying. You may never let out a single word while everyone else around you is singing their hearts out during worship. But God sees you. God knows you. And He is moving in your life. I can promise you that. And I can promise you this, that if you will grab hold of His presence and let His Spirit fill your life, then you will have incredible stories to tell. People need to know about just how good Jesus truly is and how much He loves them. So make it a habit to share your faith stories and watch as other people start making their own.